On today's episode of The Rig Doctor, I'm going to be working with Rhett Shull to put his pedalboard back together. For many of you that follow both of our channels, you know that he recently had a massive pedalboard catastrophe when flying from Boston to London, and his pedalboard was completely dismantled by TSA. He called me in a panic on stage. We had a few minutes to try to troubleshoot it there, but it wasn't enough time to make this thing happen. In the heat of the battle, he ended up having to go directly into his amp. Definitely a musician's worst nightmare of anything going wrong on stage. You definitely don't want to have a situation where you need your pedal board to create some of the signature sounds of an album and you can't do it. I always feel guilty when something goes wrong with a pedal board, even if it has nothing to do with me, and I really wanted to help him, but luckily we get a chance to redeem that this afternoon. He's got a couple of hours before he's going to head to Nashville on his next tour with Jessy and I'm going to help him get the rig back together. Hopefully in the time that we have, I'm going to give Rhett a call on FaceTime. Let's see what happens. My name is Mason Marangella. I build rigs for the industry's top professionals. Now I'm teaching guitarists how to build rigs like the pros with DIY tips, easy mods, and all the tricks of the trade. I am the Rig Doctor.
I'll show you, basically this is as it came out of the Pelican case flying back from London Gatwick yesterday. So all of the pedals are like shifted. The switcher is disconnected and loose. The volume pedal is shifted and was detached.
Right.
These pedals down here are loose. Well, the boost is. So, and then all these pedals in the back row are loose. I think they removed this bottom row because when we first flew from Atlanta to Boston to catch our flight to London, I opened the case up when I picked it up from security, and these three pedals were completely detached and floating around inside the case, but nothing back here was. So my hunch is somebody at TSA had a tool with them and detach, because this is all dual lock, right? There's also some damage here on the edge of the switcher I just noticed from being knocked into,
right.
I guess, our pedal. And my thought is that because some of these cables were unplugged from the back as well. And so my thought is maybe we've got a bad cable back here.
I'm going to break for a second to explain exactly what's happening here. Now, whenever you troubleshoot a pedal board, it's not a good idea to do the whole thing at once. You need to start in blocks. I always recommend starting at the very end and then working back to the beginning. So that would mean plugging your amplifier into the very last pedal and plugging your guitar into the very last pedal, ensuring that you have signal, and then bringing in the next pedal. As soon as you start to hear or have any problems being exhibited, that's the point when you would stop and start diagnosing. I'm going to link a video here that shows some of my pedalboard best practices on how you can clean and fix up some pedals that may be problematic, but let's get back to Rhett. So in terms of troubleshooting, I mean, the best way to do it is starting at the end and then working backwards. And so that way, so basically like what we'll do now is I think we'll just look at the very last pedal, which is the Big Sky, right?
Yeah.
Which is coming out of the volume pedal.
Yeah.
Before it goes back to the amp. So basically what we'll do is you'll just plug guitar into the input of the Big Sky and then go out of the volume pedal the way that you would normally go back to your amp and make sure that works. And then we'll just go one by one backwards from the very end of the rig and then just figure out where the trouble spots are and then address them on a case-by-case basis. So are you ready to start the troubleshooting?
Yeah, so I've got a cable here plugged into my Skylark.
Okay.
And that's passing signal.
Okay, cool.
So go out of the volume
pedal.
So
go out of the volume pedal, which is just a passive pass-through for people that haven't seen your video, and the volume pedal is not coming after everything. And then you're going to plug your guitar input into the Big Sky, which is the last real pedal.
Volume pedal for right now. Yeah, working.
Okay, so let's now plug the timeline back into it, and now I want you to go into the input of the timeline, and the timeline is just the next pedal back from the Big Sky.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Okay, so now let's continue to work backwards. Let's go into the input of the Mobius. Or actually, you know what? Not the input of the Mobius, because we used the send and return. I want you to go into the return of the Mobius with your guitar.
I don't know if you can see that, but this...
Oh my gosh, yeah, so that's really bent.
Yeah.
So that probably has a lot to do with it. Let's try this, just to kind of test. Take your output cable now that's currently coming, going to the amplifier. I want you to plug that into the output and then put the guitar into the return.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And I have more of these plugs here with me.
Do you want to look at the other cables on the Mobius there just to see if we see any like glaring issues as far as bent connectors?
Those look okay. That looks okay. Yeah. So I think it's really just this guy.
Okay. So we've kind of identified a couple of things. We have at least one cable on the Mobius that's been bent and damaged. What I want to do now is let's continue to work backwards, but the way that we're going to have to do that is you're going to now plug your amp cable into the send
Okay.
of the
Mobius.
Yeah. So now what I want you to do is plug your guitar into the input of your volume pedal as though you're starting at the beginning of the chain. And just kind of have everything in the switcher off at this point.
And then, but I'm plugging the...
Yeah, guitar would go in as though you were just normally plugging into your pedal board. So let's see if we have any signal here at this point.
Yes.
Okay, so it sounds like we have signal to that point.
Yeah.
All right, so we know that we're good to the input, or like the first section of the Mobius. We're going to have to either go out of the last pedal in the ES5, or if you can, have access to the output of the ES5. Either one of those will make work. Because that'll help us just isolate if there's any problems internally on the ES5.
Oh, wait a second. Might have a culprit here. So the boost is actually ES5, right?
Is it in the ES5? I don't remember.
It's out of the ES5. Well, I'm trying to figure out how to switch my camera on. Check this out. I just pulled it out, and we have both connections undone. So let me just quickly
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
And so I'm going guitar into volume pedal.
Yeah, and then you can... Let's just try this again just in case it's working.
Yep.
Aha! So as you can see on this wasn't an issue of cables falling apart that were, just wear and tear. This was something that was clearly messed with on the TSA side. Clearly one of the cables was bent. There was no way for that to happen other than by force, and with it being in the Pelican case that Rhett has, it's just impossible that it would have had that sort of break angle where it almost was bent to maybe a 30-degree angle. It's just not possible that would have happened organically. There's had to be somebody pulling apart the pedal board, not understanding what was going on, and they damaged one of the cables. It was actually amazing to me that it still worked even though it had that bent piece, and really the main issue was everything was unplugged and it just wasn't plugged back in. This is another reason why on switchers I always like to label everything so you know where all of the ins and outs are, you know what all the plugs are corresponding to, whether that's a send or return, and having those things unplugged is certainly enough to give you a problem on stage. Now this was a pretty easy troubleshoot in that there really was no damage other than Rhett needing to just remake one of those cables that had a bent end. There really wasn't anything to do here, and it seemed like it still worked even though the plug had experienced that amount of stress on the actual plug itself. Now, for those of you that are troubleshooting a rig and actually are having a problem, Again, the best thing to do is to work in blocks. Don't try to take on the whole pedal board at once. An easy thing that I like to do, especially if you're experiencing noise, if your pedal will take a 9-volt battery, that's a really easy way to help you troubleshoot noise. And if we had had any of those problems with any of the pedals that would accept batteries on Rhett's board, that would have been the first thing that I would have had him do. Start to troubleshoot by, instead of using the power supply, go to an isolated, the original isolated supply, I should say, a 9-volt battery, and see if that takes care of the problem. Or another thing I like to do if I think there's a problem with the pedal is I'll just bypass it. I'll jumper a cable from one pedal to another and skip the one that I think is problematic and see if my signal returns. It's not always an issue with the cable. Sometimes there can be internal issues with the pedal. Sometimes the jacks can have bad contacts. Again, you should check out the video that I linked earlier in this video that talks about best practices for maintaining your pedals and pedal board. And this will help a lot of pedals come back to life that maybe have scratchy jacks and things like that. When you troubleshoot, and I get this question asked all the time about how to diagnose a problem, is don't bite off the entire pedal board. People try to go for too much, and it's hard to isolate individual variables. Start one pedal at a time, work backwards, starting at the end and going all the way back from the beginning, and just add in one more pedal at a time. If you have a switcher, it does make it a little bit easier in some senses because you're able to isolate every loop. But if there's a problem and you have everything bypassed, you typically want to look at either the input or the output, because those are the two sides that are not in any loops. So you can look at those as being the problems. You can, of course, just go directly into your amp out of the output. That way you can just isolate whatever's in the switcher. Or if it's not in the switcher, you can do just what we did for Rhett, where you start at the end and you work all the way back to the beginning and you see where the problems are. Now, if you have specific questions about your rig, about problems you're having, I'd like to help. So please make sure that you comment below. If you like the content that you saw today, I highly recommend that you subscribe and that you hit the bell icon. That way you're always updated whenever new content comes out from us at Vertex. If you want to support the channel even further, you can check out our full line of effects that we manufacture at Vertex Effects at vertexeffects.com. I will link our store page below so you can check out our variety of boost, overdrive, distortion pedals, all great pedals with a lifetime warranty. And leave us a comment or give us a like. All those things help the channel. All of those are things that we appreciate. So please do those things if you can. Until next time, I'm Uncle Mason, the Rig Doctor. Adios.